Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. For this one we're going to return to France, and if you've been watching my reviews for a few months now or whatever, you'll remember that I said I took a trip to Paris and brought back some French craft beer with me. And I got this from a little shop in Paris called La Cave à Boulet. Their Facebook link is in the video description for you below, but if you find yourself in Paris, go and visit them. Very, very nice guys who speak very good English, and they're always willing to point you in the direction of some very good French craft beer. So one of the ones that they recommended for me that I'm going to review for you today is from Brasserie Outland, and these guys are a Parisian brewery, and this beer is called Home. It's an American pale ale, and what's unusual about this brewery is that they do name their beers with sort of English or American names, when obviously you would expect them to be named after French things, but very, very cool nonetheless. So as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll take you through a very brief history of the brewery. I'll tell you a little bit about where the beer comes from and all of that sort of thing. If you don't want to stick with me for that, then feel free to fast forward a few minutes into the video and you will get straight to the tasting. The brewery website's in the video description for you below, along with the link to my other French beer reviews that I've been doing for you over the last little while. So anyway, the Outland Brewery is a microbrewery from eastern Paris in the district of Bagnolet, and the brewmaster of this brewery is Jan Geffriod. And originally he'd been a teacher and had actually taught for a period in New York, and this was where his love of craft beer really began to sort of take hold. And he began homebrewing in his kitchen after being introduced to sort of craft beer brewing by his friend Justin Crossley, who's the head of an organisation called the Brewing Network in America. Now, together with another friend, Florent Zimotek, he began brewing on a bigger scale, and their involvement in the American craft brewing network really influenced the styles of beers that you get from this brewery. And apparently they are a very sort of hop forward and American style brewery, which is meant to be very, very nice. Now, also working in the brewery is their friend Roman, who is actually a wine enthusiast who became a beer brewer after tasting some of their beers. So they are quite an interesting company in that way. A lot of different influence goes into making their beer, but they say that their brewing is particularly influenced by Heretic Brewing, Sam Adams and Russian River from the USA, and they plan to work on a few collaboration brews with these breweries in the very near future. And Brasserie Outland are actually also quite heavily involved in the organising of the Paris Beer Week, which is the first craft beer festival ever to be organised in Paris. So that's your sort of brief history of Brasserie Outland from Bagnolet in Paris. So we'll get on to the tasting of this beer now. Just before we do that though, to list the other beers you can get from this brewery, you can get the American Brown Ale, American Pale Ale, East Kent Golding Brown Ale, English Brown Ale, the Home, which is this guy here, India Pale Ale, L'America, Oatmeal Stout, Hop Citra, Hop Columbus, Hop Simcoe, Hop West Coast IPA, Tasty, and also West Coast IPA. So you can see, as I mentioned, just from a couple of these beers that they have named there, they are a very sort of American craft brewing influenced brewery, which is obviously very cool. It's really interesting to actually try my sort of my first French American pale ale, if you like. So this guy is a 5.2% American pale ale, and we'll get this guy out and on with the tasting then. So I'll bring up the camera and let you have a little quick look at the artwork here. As you can see, this woman's kind of tied up here. I'm not sure exactly why she is, but she's speaking on the phone. I'm not sure exactly what the kind of idea behind that is, but it's quite a nice little bottle actually. You can see on the side it says here Brasserie Outland. It does have the kind of contact details on the side for the brewery there, and it has a little bit of an interesting rating system on this here. It says it has a kind of alcohol, amateur and couleur, so I mean, I guess that probably means colour and sort of bitterness or flavour or something like that. So you can see it just has that kind of bar graph rating on the side there. So a very interesting presentation on this one here, but let's get it out and get on with the tasting then. So as I said to you, 5.2% American Pale Ale, and my very first French beer of this type. So let's get it out and into the glass then. This is going to have a nice kind of big head on it, I think. I just need to watch that I don't go crazy with it. Just let it calm down a wee bit. Pours like a Belgian beer actually, which is quite interesting. As you can see, a massive head on this one. It really does smell like an American pale ale. Very, very fruity and things like that. But we'll leave the last little bit just now and have a little look at the colour of this guy. We'll let the head just kind of calm down a little bit. So as you see, if I bring the light over this beer here, you can see it's a very nice kind of put it right up like that, and you can see it's a very nice kind of sort of dark orangey amber colour. Really nice looking beer. There is a little bit of carbonation just going up to the top of the head here, or the underside of the head, sorry, just a little bit there. It's quite an opaque one as well. If I put my fingers behind it, you can't actually see through it. So a very kind of opaque beer, a nice, really rich, orangey gold amber colour on this one. A solid, pretty much a 3-finger frothy white head there. The beer kind of went a little bit crazy. We'll put the last little bit in and just let it die down. There you are. So it's poured nicely, poured exactly like a Belgian beer would. And we'll put the light back down there. But as you can see, we'll just give it a little. We'll just have a little smell of the aroma, and hopefully the head will die down before we go to taste it. So very kind of fruity hop forward, which is what you would expect from an American Pale Ale. It has quite a nice smell of kind of tropical fruit actually, but there's a lot of citrus in there too. It's got a nice kind of sort of orangey, no, maybe a little bit of a kind of mix between an orangey or tangerine citrus in there. It's quite sharp actually. But there's a pine resin aroma kind of underlying there too. And there's a lot of tropical fruit sticking out in this one, kind of pineapple, peaches and grapefruit definitely. And if you sugar it up just a little bit, you can detect just the kind of, when you sugar it a bit, you can detect that mix that you usually expect from an APA between the sort of caramel, the nice sweet caramel malts and the kind of bready malt base that you expect. It actually smells a little bit grainy, but the most prominent component of the aroma here is definitely the tropical fruit. It's very, very sharp, a nice kind of peachy, not quite, maybe a little bit pineapple-y, but a nice kind of mix between peachy and grapefruit mainly. And there is definitely a sort of, if you kind of breathe it in more widely, if that makes sense, or you will pick up that it has got quite a lot of citrus in it, this one. But a very attractive aroma to this one. Very, very nice, sharp, fruity flavour. So I'm expecting quite a kind of juicy IPA from this one. So let's give it a taste and see how we get on. So this is my first review from Brasserie Outland, and this is their home beer. That's really, really nice. Beautiful beer. Not quite as juicy as you would expect, but it definitely has a lot of fruity character in it, which is nice. It's quite resinous. You don't pick up the sort of pine resin so much in the aroma. They're quite subtle, but it does have quite a heavy sort of pine aroma element, or pine resin aroma to it. What I'm noticing as well is that it's actually quite a dry beer. It's got a lot of kind of really bitter kind of hop character to it, which is obviously what you expect from an APA, but it's drier than most actually, and it's quite interesting in that regard. But yeah, you've got a nice juicy element, and that's where the kind of sort of sharp peachy flavours coming out. You get around the edges of the tongue, you're getting the nice kind of grapefruit and citric flavours just lying there. The grapefruit has just that tiny little bit of sour character, but as you get this little bubble that kind of moves over the tongue, and that sort of brings out the sharper kind of tangerine and peachy flavours to this one, which is quite interesting. Over the rest of the tongue though, you're getting a nice big bready aroma. There's only just a little bit of caramel in there in this one. It's not very sweet either. It's actually perhaps bordering on a sort of biscuity malt base, this one, to be honest, but it's big and bready and just a tiny, tiny little hint of caramel in there. It comes out a little bit more actually as the beer kind of progresses and maybe warms slightly. You're just getting a little bit of the sweet caramel right bang in the middle of the tongue, and it's very, very nice in that regard actually. The blend of flavours in this one is really interesting. When it's a French-American Pale Ale, it does have a really very interesting and quite different blend of flavours, and you do find that when you try this type of beer from different countries. But yeah, it has that nice, as I say, that nice juicy, orangey, sort of tangerine flavour with a little bit of the peat sharpness comes towards the front of the tongue, just on a little bubble, and around the edges you're getting the sort of citric and more kind of sour grapefruit flavours. In the middle of the palate you're getting a little bit of sweet caramel right up the middle, but it almost has a kind of bready, it has quite a bit of a bready malt base, but there is a kind of element of biscuit malt in there as well. So it's a really interesting beer, this one. Very, very nice, and I would love to try some of their other stuff actually. There's an element of kind of grain to the bready malt base in this one as well. You just get a little bit of it when you kind of take a gulp of the beer, but I mean, this is, in terms of the taste of this beer, really, really beautiful, and a very interesting kind of take on the style too. You can notice little subtle differences in this with the Parisian water and stuff like that, so it's quite interesting. The beer does have a bit of a more wet mouthfeel rather than an oily mouthfeel, which is maybe just one of the aspects of the water that's used in the beer. In terms of the mouthfeel though, it's quite mid-bodied, it's got a kind of moderate carbonation, it has what you would expect from the style. It does have a good bit of dry character actually, that's what I said at the start. It does have a little bit, the bittering character from the hops is actually quite a drying one, but the actual feel of the liquid of the beer is quite wet, if that makes sense, rather than oily. So it's quite interesting in that regard. As I say, I think that is just perhaps the Parisian water. But I mean, it's only moderately bitter as well. It's not that much of a bitter IPA. The pine resins do have a good kind of bitter bite to it, but it's quite well balanced out by the sort of fruity flavours of the beer, which is really interesting. It does have quite a juicy aspect to it at the same time, and that's complemented by the sort of wet mouth feel. But overall, this is a really, really interesting American Pale Ale. I highly recommend that if you get the chance, you try this beer. If you do find yourself in Paris, go and check out La Cave Boulet. Hopefully I'll get back there at some point and I can try some of the other beers from this brewery. They do plan on sort of exporting their beer over to the States at some point soon, I guess. Obviously, they've got quite good contacts over there, so hopefully it goes well for them and they can kind of pave the way for more French craft brewers. Everything I've tried from them actually is very, very good, so hopefully we can see French craft beer being sort of distributed a bit more widely, because it's very difficult to get. I found the same with Dutch beer actually, and it's a shame because all the stuff you get from them is very, very good. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this other French beer review that I've done for you here. Please let me know in the comment section your own thoughts on this beer if you do happen to have tried it before. I think it's a wonderful pale ale, definitely worth trying if you get the chance. I hope you've enjoyed this beer review, and I will be back soon with more French reviews. Let me know in the comment section your own thoughts, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I'll catch you soon with another beer review. Cheers!